Have you ever studied the conflict between traditional Catholics and Jews?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why is that such a big issue? Why do traditional Catholics and Jews have issues? What is the history behind it?
Christ killer. I mean, think about that. Until I was raised, when I was an altar boy, I'm old enough to remember, I was doing the Latin Mass. We talked about the perfidious Jews. There were things that, we always understood as far as we were concerned. It wasn't really the Romans, right? It was the Pharisees. The Jews must have given them over. That idea, you think you come from the same thing. I think often, okay, Trisha's Jewish. She just doesn't think this guy Jesus is the Messiah. She thinks he's a prophet. I think he's the Messiah. And so we have a difference of opinion. But it's much more than that. You get down to Catholicism, and you really think these are the people who rejected Jesus. They're the ones who said, no, we don't think he's the Messiah. They're the ones who killed him. And then over time, what happens? You know this, PPD. They don't have a country. So they are scattered all around different countries. They get put into ghettos and the Roman ghetto and everything else. They're allowed to do things that others aren't. So the Catholic Church wouldn't allow financial managers, to the extent they existed, to loan money at interest, same as Islam. Jews were allowed to do it. They were the money changers. When the Normans conquered England in 1066, there were no Jews in England. They brought Jews in to do what? To collect taxes and to collect fees. So the Brits, who living in the British Isles, met Jews for the first time as the people collected money. They kicked them out in 1266. They kicked them back out, brought them back in a few hundred years later with Cromwell. So this tortured history of Jews are the people about money. 1789, the French Revolution, it sweeps across Europe. This guy called Amschel Rothschild and his 5 sons walk out of the Frankfurt ghetto where they had been doing money changing. And in one generation, they're the biggest investment bank in all of Europe. The Pope has to go to them twice for a loan because the church is in such disarray. And the Rothschilds take some heat from Jews who say, hey, you're giving money to the Pope. There's still a ghetto inside of Rome. Do something for us, the Jews. So they say to the Pope, okay, we'll give you this money. You're going to pay us back, but take the wall down around the ghetto. So the Pope does that. And when the loan's repaid, the Pope builds the wall back up and goes to Catholic financiers. It's a great story. I love the true. But it gives that, it fills the trope, Jews and money, they must be controlling, right, the world. It's a secret cabal. And because they don't have a country until 1948, again, in terms of Israel, they're scattered all over the world. So it's this international cabal. And then you get the Russians doing this forgery called Protocols of Zion around 1900, which is very clever. That's actually a fictional book, but is taken to be real, which is that a group of Jews are sitting down around the table and talking about how to control everybody.
What is the argument given from both sides? How do Catholics tell the story? How do Jews tell the story?
So Catholics tell the story now, post-Vatican II.
Traditional Catholics.
Traditional Catholics.
So I sense a very deep tension from Catholics, traditional Catholics towards Jews.
I think that is still the case, and it hasn't been changed. And I think that Jews, for the most part, try to ignore that and focus only on what I call the more liberal Catholics post-Vatican II, the more accepting version of what Catholicism is. Because let me tell you something. In World War II, at a time when Hitler is finding that they've got the race laws and they're kicking Jews out of jobs and they're deporting them and everything else, La Cattolica Civita, it's this Jesuit journal, it's an official brand of the Vatican, was publishing stuff about Jews that would set your hair on fire about how they are Satan's worship, they are the spawn of Satan. They are the old traditional Catholic view was that Jews and Protestants were bad enough, but Jews were the worst of all.
And then what is Jews' argument of that towards traditional Catholics?
There isn't really the counter argument because what can they?
The only thing Jews say is we don't believe he's the Messiah.
Yeah, that's right. We don't believe that he's the Messiah.
And you're not a Jew yourself. You consider yourself still a Catholic.
Right, but this is so interesting. So hold on. I did a thing with Ben Shapiro recently. I did a podcast, not to mention. And he asked me, hey, what about all these stories that the Mossad killed Kennedy? So I spent 10 minutes telling him why I didn't think that was the case, even including the fact that they had a security meeting when the foreign minister at the time was Golda Meir, and she's trying to figure out who is killing Kennedy in that. Online, oh my God, there was a torrent of, I'm sick of 2 Yids, I'm sick of 2 Kikes talking about the Kennedys, I'm sick of you Jews always talking about this or that or whatever, just a torrent. So at one point, I forgot it was Twitter. I'm an idiot. So I said to one person, I'm not Jewish, I'm Catholic. And so they go to my Wikipedia and they see my father was Jewish. He was non-practicing Jew. My mother was the devout religious person who brought me up. And they said, oh, you're the worst type of Jew. You're the type of Jew who pretends not to be a Jew, so you can sneak into all of the organizations and groups that Jews aren't allowed into because you can pretend to be a Catholic, but you're really a Jew in your DNA in every way. And I thought, you know what? How did I answer that one? So I very much think of myself as a Catholic, but just not a Catholic who's collecting communion every Sunday.
Well, by the way, what's a good book to read on the feud between traditional Catholics and Jews? Is there a book to read on that topic?
There is. Maybe you should do a book on that. I
actually think it would be an interesting one.
Okay. So sorry to jump out of the chair here, but if you said to me in your work on the Vatican, the money in the Vatican, what was your big get? It turned out to be World War II, because the Vatican, not surprisingly, was investing in the Nazis and Mussolini's country at the same time they're investing in America and Britain. They do what you expect them to do. They're playing both sides. They don't know who's going to win. And as a matter of fact, 98% of the cardinals at the time were Italian, so their brothers on the other side of the wall were generals and admirals and wherever else, so they knew them. So of course there's some support. They formed the Vatican Bank, which is like a cross between Goldman Sachs and the Federal Reserve, in the middle of the war, 1942, because Roosevelt is looking for neutral countries doing business with the enemy. So the Vatican says we can go off the grid if we have our own bank. So they form the Vatican Bank. They drop off the grid. They invest in both sides, and they invest in life insurance policies. You're going to love this, of Generali and Allianz. And Generali, an Italian company, had more life insurance policies of Jews in Eastern Europe than anybody else. They had targeted them and signed them up. And when those Jews went to the death camps, Generali took the cash value of the policies off, and their profits went through the roof. So the Vatican had these big outsized profits. At the end of the war, the Vatican said, not us. We didn't invest in the enemy. We only invested in the United States and Britain. We were smart enough to know who the winners were from 1939, and everybody forgot about it. Now, who's been trying to prove that over time? The World Jewish Congress and others. So if you're a traditional Catholic, you say, see, look at those Jews. They keep coming after the church. They attack Pius XII, who was this great pope, and they say he didn't do enough during the Holocaust. They're trying to get us to pay reparations all these years later. It just adds fuel to the fire.
Well, Rob, can you pull up the story about Rothschild tearing down the wall, Catholic Church, and then rebuilding it, and then send that over to me? I'd be.
It's in my book, and I'll give it to you later. You'll like it. It's a good one.
Is it in the Catholic book?
Yeah,
the
God's
Vatican
Banker.
book?
Yeah, God's Bankers. And as a matter of fact, there were Catholic financiers who were insulted. Think in the 1800s, and by the way, church had an empire, papal states. It wasn't a postage piece land. They had a court of 800 hangers-on, as big as the French court. It was a big thing. There, the King of Naples, everybody else used to come to pay homage to the Pope. He was a territorial landowner. And the great thing about the Catholic Church, which I like so much, when I was raised in it, I knew nuns, Sisters of Charity, and then Jesuits. I thought of it just as a religion, but it's the only religion that also has a country. So the same priest, all men, who are making decisions on faith, then put on a different hat in their Secretary of State, or they're making decisions on policy or whatever else. So they're running a country at the same time, and before they lost the papal states, it was a real empire.
Yeah. I mean, so you're not an active Catholic, because if you are, you would be attending Mass. A traditional Catholic may criticize you and say, come on, you're not a traditional Catholic.
That's right.
You don't attend Mass.
That's right. And a traditional Catholic would say that I must not be a real Catholic because my father was a Jew. Now, my mother, who was a devout Catholic, she married my father, never took communion again, because you're not allowed. It's a marriage outside of the faith. It was considered bad. She went to church. She would say her novenas. She would pray for us and all of this. But she never again took communion. It was her own self-enforced thing. I grew up at a time when you couldn't eat meat on Friday. Bad for the meat industry.
Well, I'm definitely eating meat on Friday. For me, it's if I don't eat meat, I just feel like I'm not me. I have to eat. I had some bison last night with the most medium rare bison and some beef carpaccio, and it was delicious. But Gerald, I've really enjoyed it. I'm glad we did this.
Hi, I'm Gerald Posner. I'm an investigative reporter. I've written 13 books about everything from chasing Nazi war criminals to the heroin trade to 9/11 to Saudis to fundamentalists. And to the drug industry and to money inside the Vatican. You can ask me just about everything on my next. Reach out to me and talk to me about 9/11, find out what's happening in terms of the Epstein files. If you want to find out what's happened in the recent Trump assassination attempt by crooks, I'm looking into that as well. I've got a whole series of things, including the transgender industry on children, that are on my hot list, so send me some questions.
If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.